Hey guys, I am back. Been a few days. I know. Um, but at least I'm finally getting to this live stream, which I had planned about 2 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago, but yeah, it happens. So today is June 19th, or it's closing. This was June 19th. It's about to be midnight in less than 10 minutes. So, it's June 19th. I didn't really make a big deal of this holiday like I did last year. Um, Simply because, this holiday's only been around. This is like what the third year it's been celebrated. Mm, yeah, 23, 20. Yeah, I think there's like the third or the fourth year that Juneteenth has been celebrated. So there's really no, um, I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any big thing about it yet. um, And so I'm not gonna go over it again like I did last year. Last year I did not a big thing, but I did a whole live stream on the Juneteenth celebration, and I went over the history of it like 3 or 4 times during the live stream for people who were coming into the live stream at different points of time. And so I don't think I need to do that again today. For people who are curious about that, they can go into my video video playlist and find that previous live stream that I did about the Juneteenth celebration. So this won't be about the Juneteenth celebration. It's late. It's about to Juneteenth is about to be over. So I'm gonna get stay with my original topic, which is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Um, and there is no coincidence that Men's Mental Health Awareness Month and Pride Month fall on the same day. So that's the thing. So um, I usually don't take questions on mental health since I'm not a licensed or board certified practicing therapist, but I'll take some genuine questions and try to guide people to where they can seek help on those questions. So hello to everyone coming into the chat room. Again, this for people wanting to know what this topic is about. This is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Yeah, Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Yeah. And like I said, today is Juneteenth. So, so Juneteenth is, it's an important holiday for foundational Black Americans because it it marks the day when, uh, after the Civil War was over, that um, the slaves knew of their emancipation because they're even after after the Civil War had ended, they were still slaves that were unaware that they had been given their freedom. So there was a Union Army regiment that came upon a plantation in Galveston, Texas, on June 19th, 1865, and had to inform these folks, "Hey, you don't have to be here anymore. You're free," and that marks this federal holiday. So anyone who doesn't care about the holiday, suck a dick, get the fuck off my page. Straight up like that. Because I don't abide by fucking morons and retards. So if you're a fucking retard or moron, you can get off my page because Foundational Black Americans celebrate Juneteenth. If you don't like it, you can suck a dick. Okay, pumpkin. Anyway, um, aside from that, again, it is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. One of the things about Men's Mental Health Awareness Month is that guys will not capitulate to stupid bitches like this one on my chat. We don't do that here. On top of that, you know, I'm Gen X, so I have very little patience for Gen Z retards. And being from Baltimore, I have swagger and I can fight. So yeah, I'm not one of your little silly YouTubers who need to beg for money. Like, oh please, please like me. Nah, nah, you can suck a dick. So that's how it's going to be here. Now, having said all that, like I said, being that is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, I will take, maybe some questions from the fellas if they're curious, if they have questions, because I know late at night you have a lot of folks who are mentally unwell. So I will take those questions. And if not, we can end this and I will go back to watching my Peaky Blinders before I go to bed. But that's how we doing it. That is how we are doing it here. If you came here thinking this was some other sort of YouTuber and you were gonna talk slick on my in the chat room on my live, yeah, you thought wrong. You thought wrongly here. So if someone wants to ask questions on Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, feel free to do so. By the way, I ignore those little automatic feature where it said hi. I find that increasing. I find that rather weird. So, but to anyone, OBQ Kenobi is here. So, um, yeah, but if anyone, like I said, got questions on Men's Mental Health Awareness Month about mental health questions or something related to that, go ahead and ask them. You can ask them here today where I won't charge you for it. I'm not going to ask you to donate to the cause. However, I am still taking donations, not necessarily for me, but for a friend of mine in the Philippines. For people who haven't seen my live streams last week, I had a guest on twice who lives in the Philippines well, originally from Cebu, which is a region in the Philippines. This well, it's a, um, that is an island amongst mainland Philippines, the Luzon, I guess, who lost everything in a super typhoon. And so, I've been trying to help her. She was someone who originally I had hired to do a website for me 3 years, and she disappeared. I thought she just, you know, decided not to do the job, and then I found out it was because she had lost, you know, most of her stuff. So, and I guess she, worked at a call center, well, several call centers back and forth. And this is not someone who's who was, uneducated or a person with no work experience. She has an IT degree. It's in a sorority. No, I think she's in co-ed fraternity. I'm not for the co-ed fraternities, but that's whatever. That's a different subject. But yeah, she was in the co-ed fraternity. She graduated with an IT degree, and which is why I initially contracted with her so that she could develop a website for me for my side business at the time. Uh, and then I never heard from her since. And then I found out, about a month ago, what that she couldn't contact me because basically she had lost everything in a typhoon and moved to a different location where she's basically not uh not in a boarding house, but in a house that she shares with other folks. Um, XTIC says, "How do you feel about LA?" Um, I mean, that's not really related to this topic. So, but I've expressed my thoughts on that in other videos, in a couple of them actually. If people are interested in that. However, I will take questions that have nothing to do with the topic if people want to drop it in a super chat. If you want to ask me questions that don't have anything to do with men's mental health awareness month, then drop it in the super chat and I'll answer that question. But for now, I'm only answering questions about men's mental health awareness month. But if you want to ask me a question that has nothing to do with men's mental health awareness month, again, you can drop it in the super chat, or you can drop, or you can send me a cash app. If my, I don't think any of my moderators are in the chat room since I don't see anyone. I only see one person active. But if I do have a moderator in the chat room, please drop my cash app handle in the in the chat room, which is dollar sign Just A Contrarian, all one word. If any, like I said, if anyone wants to donate, either because they want to ask me a question that's not about Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, or they want to send me a donation to help my friend Micah, who's in the Philippines, who was left effectively homeless 3 years ago, and now is living with her daughter in a shared space. Then what do you think is the best way to help someone with mental problems? Mm. The best way to help someone with mental problems is to insist that they go get professional help. That's what I think the best way is. And I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm saying that honestly. Like, most people are ill equipped to deal with the things that people may be going through, depending on what sort of mental disorder they're from which they're suffering. The best way to help someone is to insist that they seek professional help, or to, if they're if they're not in a position to do so, to find that professional help for them. That's the best way to help someone with mental problems. Um, Aside from that, just showing, you know, empathy. Thank you, Moonlit, for doing that. Let me go ahead and clip that, pin that to the chat board, to the chat room. But yeah, so like I said, so the question was, what's the best way to help someone with mental problems? And like I said, the best way to help someone with mental problems is to insist that they seek professional help, or to assist them in getting that professional help. And mental problems, that's such a wide swath of things. So that's the best general answer I can give to that, unless it's like something more specific. Mm. And I can give some more general. I have more general advice for people who are suffering from mental health problems. Um, Things that should be, you know, quite obvious, but sometimes things that are sometimes things are so obvious that we overlook them. But some of the best ways to take care of one's mental health is getting proper rest and nutrition. and getting daily exercise. You'd be surprised how many people don't do that. Particularly like people on social media who stay up all night. A lot of the folks tend to be um, come off a bit unhinged late at night on YouTube and on other platforms that offer streaming, because these are people who stay up all night. And it's like, of course you're like mentally unwell. Like you stay up all night, you don't eat well, you don't exercise, um, which means you probably sleep in during the day, which means you probably don't have the best of social lives, and all of that leads to usually clinical depression and anxiety disorders. These are the main folks who stay up all night long. People who are clinically depressed and people who have different sorts of anxiety disorders. And the best thing they can do outside of seeking professional help is, you know, getting proper rest at night. I mean, unless you work a now, if you work a graveyard shift, then that's unavoidable, right? But if you don't work a graveyard shift sort of job, like you're not a truck driver, you're not a police officer, um, you don't work in a factory, which is, and factory jobs are already demoralizing in themselves. But anyway, if you don't work a graveyard shift job, you should be getting rest at night, at least 6 to 7 hours, and you should be eating adequately, which means you shouldn't be up eating fire Cheetos, eating fire Cheetos and cheesesteaks and crab legs, like real food, with some veggies in it. um, XTIC says, "What if they feel getting help is bad? How to help them get help?" You can't force someone to get help other than having them committed for 48 hours, and that is going to be very hard to do. After the 70s, it was very hard to get someone like committed to a hospital for a 72-hour observation unless they pose a threat to themselves and others, like a tangible threat to themselves or others. Other than that, I mean, can't do too much. I would say that on the flip side is that is maybe you should avoid people with mental health problems, because they can be people with mental health problems can be um, they can be emotional vampires. Like someone who has a lot of fucking problems. Sorry to put it in such a blunt way, but a lot of people who have a lot of freaking problems are emotional vampires on others, and I would just avoid them if I can. If I know someone's always going to bring me down because they're always in the you know they're always moping around like Eeyore from from Winnie the Pooh. I don't want to be around someone who acts like Eeyore. Like they're emotional vampires. Um, so if someone refuses to get help and you can avoid them, then avoid them. I'm like everyone's dealing with their own problems. They don't need someone dumping their trauma onto them as well. So, but again, you can't force someone to seek help. That was the whole problem in the 70s with the community health centers. They were supposed to replace all the psychiatric hospitals. The community health centers made it voluntary for you to come in there to seek help. But the people who are the ones who are really going to need help aren't going to be the ones who seek. The people who need help are not going to be likely to be the ones who seek it. which is the whole point of having psychiatric hospitals where you can have people committed for a certain amount of time, because most people who are in a position of mental illness are not aren't able to be rational and seek help when they need it. What's up, Jr. Um, and it all started. Well, it didn't all start, but a large part of that initiative to decommission psychiatric hospitals and replace them with community health centers started with the famous novel. Is it one? I'm trying to think. Is it One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? I think. Let me turn on my computer here so I can have little my little source of info here. But the novel that was made famous turned into a movie starring Jack Nicholson, as a guy who was like a criminal who pretended to be crazy just so he could avoid prison time, until at the end of the movie he got lobotomized, which is just crazy. And you saw how like cruel this psychiatric nurse was, and how they used lobotomy as a form of punishment instead of a form of treatment. Yeah, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm right. Yep. I watched the I watched the movie, and I read the novel. So Moonlit says, yeah, emotional vampire is a great term. Anyone who's draining you of physical, emotional stamina is not healthy. Our headspace is important, and we should protect it. I didn't invent the term emotional vampire. It's kind of a common term now. I don't I don't think it's a clinical term, but it is a term used in the psychological community to refer to people who are dealing with um, mental and emotional disorders, and often they will display they would they would dump their problems onto other people, stressing them out, just so they could have someone they could have a partner in misery with them. I i i refuse to let anyone do that to me. And like, I've known others who've dealt with that. I couldn't do it. I'm gonna avoid your ass like the plague. So, but yeah, again, because of the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and the book, a lot of people, a lot of attention was brought on to the fact that psychiatric hospitals often mistreated the patients there. And so the wrong lesson was learned from that. Instead of saying, okay, well, we need to improve these psychiatric hospitals, the government just did what they normally do. They they went for the cheap fix and just say, all right, we're just going to shut them down. So they shut down a lot of psychiatric hospitals, releasing a lot of these mental health patients onto the streets. And then they opened up these community health centers. And I think this happened under Lyndon Johnson's administration mostly. Um, but they opened up these community health centers where people who had mental health problems could seek treatment, but but it was on a voluntary basis. They couldn't be just committed unless the only way to commit people now to mental institutions, they had to fit they had to fit a certain list of they had to sit yeah they had to fit a certain criteria where they could be put under 72-hour observation, and that's usually that's usually going to be a court ordered thing. It usually has to be court ordered that someone undergoes like a 72-hour observation. So it's very hard to get someone who needs help um, into a psychiatric hospital unless they do it voluntarily, um, because of the stringent laws that were a reaction again to the abuses of psychiatric hospitals, um, in that era, like 50 years ago. Um, but it was a mistake. Like I said, they swung too far to one side, then as a reaction to being too far on the other side. Like I said, the optimum solution wasn't to close down all these psychiatric hospitals. The optimum solution was to um, retrain these people, fire the people who don't need to be there, and make them make the staff there more um, empathetic to the patients, because these patients aren't bad people. They're people suffering from illness, and that's how they should be saw. That's how they should be treated. And of course, yeah, you're gonna need like security and all that sort of stuff to handle unwieldy patients. But most psychiatric patients are not as, unfortunately, as much as I love Batman and the DC Comics universe, they kind of do a disservice to the understanding of mental illness, because most people think of mental illness in terms of like the Joker and Arkham Asylum. And the thing is, most mental health patients aren't don't perpetuate violence. They're usually the victims of violence, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Most people who have mental health problems are usually the victims of violence. They're not the perpetrators of violence. So, JR says to XTIC, there are two issues with mental health. One is the person, the other is identifying true mental health issues. Well, yeah, I mean, so that comes into being a diagnostician, which I am not. I'm not trained as a diagnostician that can give a diagnosis of a person's um, issues, and then from there, um, give some sort of treatment plan. And the treatment plan is usually going to be, of broken down into three components. Like, first, you're going to have your testing and screening. That's usually done by a PhD level clinical psychologist who does the testing and screening. Um, then you're going to have usually a master's level psychologist who's like, that's this is usually a clinical social worker. So a social worker who's done like a some postgraduate work in psychological therapy. They will do the psychotherapy, and then there will be a psychiatrist, a MD, who would prescribe any medication if there needs to be any medications prescribed, or um, and if it's a severe mental illness, there might be another part, um, in addition to or in place of medicine, which is someone who could offer mild mild electrical stimulation, to this is typically for people who have like severe depression, or other sorts of related um, severe disorders where they don't respond to medicine. So they might be treated with mild electrical stimulation, but not in the way it was done in the 70s, where they would receive, again, cruel treatment, like um, they would get electrical shock treatment as a form of punishment, which is just it, cruel, unusual punishment. This is one of those sort of things that they did in these psychiatric hospitals, which got them closed. Um, XTIC says my grandmother suffers from severe bipolar disorder. My mother had her committed in 2011. How do you feel with a loved one? Um, God forbid, mental illness. Well, I mean, I've had family with mental illness. It Every family has someone with mental illness. Like we need to stop acting as if mental illness is something that's rare. It's not. It's just as physical illness is com physical or somatic illnesses are common. Mental illness is common as well. The brain is the most complicated organ in the body, and I would say the human brain is probably the most complicated organ in the universe. So until we meet a more advanced being than us, the brain is probably the most complicated organ in the universe. It, you're talking about 200. Um, wait, let me get my stuff right here. You're talking about what 200 billion brain cells, both the neurons and the glial cells, with 1 trillion synaptic connections between all of them. That's more complicated than a computer. Um, and so, with when you're talking about billions of brain cells connecting trillions of connections, things are gonna sometimes go awry. Um, and then that's not even factoring into it things like um, nutrition and all the external stimuli that can cause someone to be ill. Um, Not to mention increasing age and all these other sort of external factors that can you know impact on someone's health, whether physical or mental. So yes, mental health problems are going to be just as pervasive um, as medical problems as well. Um, Someone with severe bipolar disorder is not someone who can take care of themselves and would probably be a danger to themselves and to others. So having them committed is probably the right thing to do. And it's not something you do because you can't. It's not something you do out of frustration, like, oh, I can't deal with this person. No, the person needs professional help. Like if someone is suffering from cancer, of course they have to be hospitalized, right? It's the same thing with someone suffering severe mental illness. Yes, they have to be hospitalized for that because it's something they have to deal with, or things can go badly. JR says to XTIC, evaluate your own mental strength. But yeah, I mean, having family who've dealt with um, things like schizophrenia, depression, alcoholism, substance abuse, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm not far removed from seeing people who suffer from mental health problems. I myself have had clinical depression since I was 13, but I've learned how to treat it without needing medication. Um, Getting enough sleep and exercising daily. It was hard for me to get adequate sleep when I was younger because I used to suffer from an ulcer. that also used to keep me up at night, which meant that I suffered from, you know, I was often quite lethargic at school. So it was a negative feedback cycle. But I promise you, you can reduce, if not eliminate, mild depression and mild anxiety disorders through those things like proper rest, nut- adequate nutrition, and daily exercise, and getting some sunshine, right? Learning to log off of social media. So um, I think that helps. And then if you still need to seek professional help, by all means do so. One of the issues with seeking professional help, though, especially nowadays, since we're talking specifically about Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, is that um, treatment has become quite feminized. So you need to make sure that you're not seeking treatment from someone who's going to uh, gaslight you. Speaking for men, right? Um, Luckily, like in the U.S. as opposed to other countries, we have such a diversity of mental health treatment that you can pretty much find who you want. Like if you want like specifically a male therapist, you can find a male therapist. If you want, you can even specify the type of treatment that you want to undergo, like behavioral cognitive therapy, which is like the most science, which is the really the only science based treatment out there is cognitive behavioral therapy. Um, there are others like individual therapy, which is psychodynamic. It's a brief form of psychodynamic therapy. It's not something that's going to have you getting treatment for 20 years like traditional psychoanalysis, which is not a bit useful. Um, the problem with traditional psychotherapy treatment, particularly psychodynamic therapy, is that it's often is often very useful in gaining insight into the causes of one's problems. The problem with that is getting insight into one's problems does not usually lead to getting rid of those problems. It's best to address those problems head on, which is exactly what cognitive and behavioral therapies do. Whereas, psychoanalysis or some other sort of psychodynamic related treatment would just have you in your own headspace talking about, yeah, this is who caused this and that's what caused that, but it doesn't take care of the problem. I mean, I've undergone treatment and I've realized that a lot of I've realized through clinical insight that a cause for a lot of my problems was my family. But that really didn't help me so much as it just made me more bitter. So getting insight is not necessarily useful. What's better is usually learning rational ways to cope with your problems. So, so I'm gonna drink a lot of water because I need to hydrate. Quite dehydrated. That's another thing I should add to that as well. Um, as far as like I said, reducing or eliminating um, mild psychopathology, adequate rest, proper nutrition, hydrating, and daily exercise. hydrate. And again, with proper rest means you can get some daylight. There are benefits to receiving some, a bit of a bit of sunlight every day. We're not nocturnal animals, so we didn't evolve to sleep all day and be up all night. And people who do so typically are the ones who suffer mental health problems. Like I said, unless you work a graveyard shift, then I understand. um, but again, just let everyone know that is my cash handle in the chat room. $ Just a Contrarian. You can donate to me. If you want to ask me a question, um, or you can do so through a super chat as well. You can do it through super chat or Cash App. Super chat through the YouTube itself or Cash App that comes directly to me, so I don't have to wait for YouTube to divvy out a check to me. But that can be again because you just want to donate to my channel, you want to ask me a question, or you want to donate to my friend Micah, who I had on my live last week twice as a guest. And we talked about her struggles um, after losing everything in a super typhoon. Typhoons are basically the same things as hurricanes, uh, and there's a bit of dispute between the difference between a hurricane and typhoon. Some people just say one is one is due to latitude, the other one is due to longitude. um, but they're both, they're both tropical storms, and they both have the same measurements. Again, I'm not taking questions that don't have anything to do with Men's Mental Health Awareness Month unless you drop in a super chat. So if you're not asking me a question that has anything to do with men's mental health, I'm not answering a question unless you drop a super chat. Everyone can see the topic. It's been I've had this up on my here. I had this up on my live for a long time. So if you're not if you're not participating in my discussion, you can drop a super chat, or you can see your way somewhere else. So anyway, so back. So again, one of the I think um, issues with having Men's Mental Health Awareness Month is that it falls on June, the same month as Pride Month, and that is not by coincidence for folks who are unaware. The Men's Mental Health Awareness Month was intentionally put in the same month as Pride Month because a lot of people within the LGBTQ community are men who suffer from mental health problems like gender dysphoria. So there is a lot of um, mental health issues within the LGBTQ community. I think that's patently obvious because you can tell that some of these people are unwell by their behavior and their dispositions to act in certain ways, and that is not then that is not making fun of them. That is just an a obvious observation. And again, that is why Men's Mental Health Awareness Month coincides on the same month as Pride Month. But you know, I one thing I do like is under this current administration, we aren't just pushing, you know, Pride Month upon everyone. You know, kudos to anyone who wants to celebrate it. That's fine. But I think in highlighting Pride Month, we shouldn't forget that a lot of those folks in that community suffer some genuine psychological disorders, as not as well as social problems that may be a um, side effect of you know certain mental health issues. Yeah, this is mental again for people coming and asking me irrelevant questions. If it has nothing to do with Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm not answering a question unless you drop it in a super chat or you drop me a cash app. I'm not answering random questions. I have a topic and that will be abided by. Enough. And again, my advice for a lot of you folks is that you probably shouldn't be up late at night because a lot of you would probably have um, healthier outcomes with other people if you got adequate rest at night instead of staying up all night, unless you're work, unless because of work or school you have to be up late. But if you're not up late because of school or work or because you have a or you have a baby that you're taking care of, you should probably be getting to bed at an earlier time, so you can be more productive during the day. People up late at night tend to are going to be the ones uh, who have a higher tendency towards depression and anxiety because you're being fucking morons by staying up all night instead of taking your asses to bed, getting up early, getting some breakfast if you want to eat. But if not, get some exercise in, drinking water, and eating healthily throughout the day. That would benefit you a lot more than asking random questions 1 o'clock in the morning, almost 1 o'clock. But yeah, and like I said, I'm willing to take any question, but if it's not about my topic, I ask people to respect my time by putting it in a super chat or in a cash app because I'm not giving out information for free. Lawyers don't do it for free. Clinical psychologists don't do it for free. Professors don't do it for free. So in this age of information, if you want good information, you're gonna have to pay for it, or you can ask ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Grok. um, if you don't want to pay for information, you can always use some generative AI program to answer your questions. The problem with generative AI is that they are good at answering questions. They're not good at giving accurate information. So, there's a cost to free information, which is it may not be very good, but people will pay me for my time. If you're not like when I give a topic on a live stream, You can ask me anything about that topic, and more than willing to answer it to the best of my ability. But if you ask me a random question that has nothing to do with my topic, you're gonna pay me for my time. So that's how it be. And I told people since last year that was going to happen once I got monetized is that you're going to have to pay me for my time, or 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 you can come back to my channel when I do Ask Me Anything Day. Once a week, I do Ask Me Anything Day, where you can ask me any question and I'll answer those questions as long as they're family friendly. Um, but if this is not give me if this is not Ask Me Anything Day, which today is not, then unfortunately you will have to pay me for my time if you want to ask me questions not germane to Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm not a private investigator. But sorry, I'm looking at my computer. But yeah, so if people do people have other pertinent questions, again, dealing with mental health or maybe psychological questions in general, they don't have to be necessary about mental health. They can be about other psychological related topics. But I do want to focus on the guys. So I'm not really dealing with female issues here. This is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, and so we're not going to talk about irrelevant things. We're talking about mental health, and we're talking about issues facing men. So the reason being is a lot of men suffer in silence, and they're just told to, you know, suck it up, and they get very little empathy from the opposite sex. Why do I think mental health is on the rise with men? I don't know what you mean by mental health is on the rise. Um, if you mean mental health problems, um, I don't think mental health problems are on the rise. I think awareness of those problems are more noticeable today now. Like that's always an issue when it comes to a lot of social issues. That sometimes something seems like it's a huge problem just because now there's more better reporting on it than in the past. I mean, men have always suffered from mental health, but they exhibit it in a different ways. Usually, they down their problems in a bottle, right? Or they went out and got into, or they went out and got into a lot of fights, um, or they abuse different types of substances, or um, you know, uh, they usually had more um, different ways, usually not very good ways of handling issues because there was no one to turn to, and admitting to having mental any sort of mental illness in the past was seen as a form of weakness. So it's not that more men are suffering from mental health problems today, it's that we have better reporting of it now because there's less social stigma surrounding it. That was the whole point of creating Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, It's to highlight the fact that a lot of men suffer from problems, usually silently. This is definitely the case in the military community, where you might have people suffering from like PTSD or acute stress disorder, um, and depression and stuff like that. Um, and they dealt with it in different ways. I mean, my favorite superhero, Batman, he suffers from major depression and the childhood trauma of seeing his folks unalive right before his eyes. And he carries the guilt that if he didn't ask them to go to the movie theaters, they would still be alive. So, and but he doesn't, you know, he's not a he doesn't walk around being sad. Instead, he's just very he's you know mood he's just a moody person who stays to himself. But yeah, as far there is a certain mental health crisis that is unique to today though, which is that a lot of men are suffering from loneliness, um because you know I don't want to get too much into like economics and all that sort of stuff, but we live in an age where the middle class is dying, um, and social media highlights people who are successful, and everyone is trying to keep up with the Joneses on Instagram. And so when you don't fit that level of success, it eats at you. Like everyone wants to be like Andrew Tate on, on social media, but most men can't do that. And I think it's very unhealthy that Andrew Tate says that anyone who's not a millionaire is a loser. And it's like, yeah, okay, bro. Like, not everyone can set up and no diss to Andrew Tate, because I do like him, but like, I'm sorry, not everyone can set up a multimillionaire uh, empire by, you know, being a charlatan. I'm sorry, I'm just going to be blunt. He's a freaking charlatan, and he's not. And it's funny they call him a red pill a real red pill content creator, because he's not. Um, he's black pill. Like, he may diagnose the problems for men in the terms of the red pill, but he offers no healthy solutions to those problems. He makes money off of those men's misery, and that's just black pill. Um, Omar says, my dad always told me that women live longer than men because they are allowed to cry and express, but the man has to be strong and tough all the time. Nah, don't buy that. Um, Here's the thing: men are and women are differently. We express, we ex, we're not that. And again, that's the problem with the feminizing of mental health treatment, is that you can't solve men's problems the way you solve women's problems through just discussing it. That's not how men function. This is why I always advocate for men to be physically fit. Men are healthiest when they are eating well, fit, and they are primed for violence. I don't mean they should be violent and getting into fights. What I mean is that you are physically fit enough that if you need to, you can protect yourself and others. And this is, but let's face it, a lot of men aren't physically fit. Look at the average American man. They're overweight and overeat. They typically are couch potatoes. This is what ails a lot of modern men. And it may just be the case that women of our species, and this happens in other animal species as well, sometimes um, the opposite sex may live longer than the males, and sometimes vice versa. That could that could just be a fact of human that could just be a fact of human nature that the opposite sex tends to live longer because you see it across cultures. So I think it is misleading to say that women live longer because they are allowed to express emotions. Any clinical psychologist who's worth his weight in salt will tell you that it is not always healthy to be constantly emoting. It's not. It can be quite inappropriate at times, and it can cause more problems. Moonlit says, "Yeah, the Tate brothers or something else." Again, I like the Tate brothers. I'm just saying that they are black pill. People should not be looking. People should not be looking to them for advice. The best I could say about them is that you should try to emulate. You should try to emulate their success, but you should not try to emulate their success by listening to them. If that makes sense. Carlton says, "Peace, J.A.C. What's up?" Strawberry rice says, "Obesity is on the rise." Yeah, our our Western diet is very unhealthy, and people can say what they want about uh, Robert Kennedy Jr., but he's right that we our our food our food is unhealthy. The things that we allow in American food products are not allowed in most places overseas. And you notice as other nations adopt a more American based diet, they start to suffer more from obesity and mental health problems. Carlin says, "I agree with you. When I exercise and eat right, I feel unstoppable." Yes, sir. Like, look, again, like I said, being this is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, we have to be honest and say that often it is the case that going to the gym is going to be more, going to the gym for most men is going to be more therapeutic than talking to a psychologist. It simply is. Now, I'm not saying that men should avoid seeking professional help because I'm a huge advocate of that. However, like I said, mental health treatment is often feminized, and it is a fact of the matter that more traditional men benefit more from going to the gym and staying fit than seeking therapy. But obviously, if you have more moderate to severe illness, then you do need mental health treatment because you're probably going to also need some sort of um, psychomedication, psychoactive medication. Strawberry says fasting is good too. Well, I don't know if intermittent fasting is great as far as mental clarity. It can be, but it's just I would say intermittent fasting is just a good component of um, of weight management. I think intermittent fasting is a good part of weight management. One thing foisted onto the American culture, which is not really useful, is the whole insistence on 3 meals a day. We don't eat 3 meals a day. That is a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution because it benefited these industrial tycoons, these robber barons, from making insisting people lead certain lifestyles to make them more productive at work, not necessarily better, not necessarily making foot. Sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. The things that we've been taught have been more beneficial in the heyday of the industrial revolution for having more productive workers, but not so much for those workers themselves being healthy and happy people. So the insistence on an 8 hour 8 hours of sleep, three, 3 meals a day, getting up and eating breakfast, uh, uh, th- this stuff is not really. This is not. This stuff is not true. First of all, through most of human history, we've had a biphasic sleep schedule. Biphasic sleep is just a fancy way of saying that we sleep twice a day. And so most throughout human history, especially in the, Paleocene era where, you might have to deal with, saber-toothed tigers and shit. Um, it probably wasn't good to be asleep all night in a cave where you might get gobbled up. I'm just saying. But so typically we had a biphasic sleep schedule where you might sleep 3 or 4 hours, then you get up for an hour to, maybe to get something to eat, um, find some food or have some sex, do whatever. Then you go back to sleep for another few hours until daylight. That was how most people slept throughout most of human history up until the early 1900s. Um, and again, the 3 meals a day is not useful. Like the whole breakfast thing was like was supposed to be like, oh well, you didn't if you didn't eat. Last time you ate was what, 6 p.m., right? You getting up at like 5 a.m., so you need to break that fast and we don't live like that anymore. And a lot of people, such as myself, typically aren't even hungry when they wake up. I can't, unless I didn't eat the previous day. I mean, unless I didn't eat dinner the previous day, I cannot eat earlier than like mm, 8, maybe not 9 a.m., maybe 8 a.m. at the earliest. Before, like, really before 9 a.m., I'm just not hungry. Really, the only thing, usually the only thing I want that early is coffee. Um, but yeah, the insistence on 3 square meals a day, getting breakfast as soon as you wake up, getting 8 hours of sleep. These are manifestations of an industrial revolution, and was um, orchestrated by people who are trying to find out what was a way to make the most productive worker. So, uh, Omar says, "What do you think happened to a person like Jeffrey Dahmer? Would exercise helped him?" Uh, I really can. I can't armchair diagnose Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, I guess we already know significantly about him. Um, what I'll say is he tends to be a textbook psychopath. Psychopaths are born that way. You can't. There's not much you can do for it. Now, I want to make it clear though, not all psychopaths are homicidal. I, I want to make that crystal clear because when people think psychopath, they think the Joker and stuff like that. Um, most psychopaths are not violent necessarily, nor are they homicidal. What a psychopath, what is the the biggest the most common uh, symptom of a psychopath is they lack empathy for others, and psychopaths generally um, are born with that condition. And here's another thing that might twist your wig a little bit. A lot of things classified as mental health disorders would have been beneficial to people in certain earlier parts of human history, right? So, for instance, psychopaths were useful in certain situations. Psychopaths were useful during wartime, and psychopaths were often useful in carrying out judicial punishments. Like, you needed the guy who could, you know, put someone in the guillotine or chop their head off with an axe without, you know, be, be, I've noticed this is very morbid, but you needed people who could carry out killings for the state without, you know, reacting to it. In the military community today, you'll have, if someone is really honest with you, someone who's um, maybe served in special forces, a lot of these guys will tell you, like, these are the nicest guys. These will be some of the nicest dudes you've ever met. But when it comes to doing that CQB, when they're training at close quarters to kill without hesitation, and once they are off duty, they can function without thinking about the people that they unalived, like, and that would be hard for a lot of most that would be hard for most people to do, to just you know off like dozens of people a week ago, and now you're sitting there in Shake Shack enjoying a strawberry shake and a double bacon cheeseburger with your wife and kids, like nothing happened. Like, not everyone can do that. So a person who is a psychopath can do that. So there are certain, when you look at evolutionary psychology, there are certain mental health disorders that might have been actually functional in an era where things were more, well, things were different. Um, yeah, exercise isn't going to help a psychopath other than making them more fit to do malevolent things. Again, but not all psychopaths are do malicious and malevolent things. However, you do see a lot of people who are psychopaths or sociopaths. Those are two different things, by the way. They tend to function well in corporate America and in financial services. That's all I'll say about that. Mona says, I can't eat 3 meals a day. Two, yeah, usually one big meal at night and small snacking throughout the day. I can't eat right when I wake up at all. It would have to go around noon before I grab a snack. Well, here's the thing: some people might function better with multiple meals a day, like instead of three, four, or five. Like, actually, that's what they recommend for people who are trying to lose weight, is that they actually eat 4 or 5 meals a day instead of three. The reason being is that those 4 or 5 meals a day are smaller, and they keep they keep people with a sense of satiety all day long. Um, so they don't overeat, because when you feel so hungry from meal to meal, it's going to make you more likely to overeat. And with someone trying to lose weight, they want to be in a caloric deficit, and the easier way to do that is that they have small little snacks uh, throughout the day, where they always feel they always have a sense of being fulfilled, so they don't overeat. But typically, a lot of overweight people do the exact opposite. um, when they try to lose weight, they try to only eat once or twice a day, and they don't know that that's actually counterproductive, because when you only eat once or twice a day, when you're trying to lose weight, it doesn't work, because your body is thinking that it's starving, and it's actually going to store more of that food as energy, aka fat. um, and the best way to keep your body from storing extra energy when it doesn't need to is to eat periodically throughout the day, but smaller meals than you typically would 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day. Carlin says, in the morning, I'll have something light to eat. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll eat in the morning. I just can't eat like before 9 a.m. typically, because it's just too early. Like, the only time I eat that early is if I was either I ate really, like, my dinner was really early, or I didn't have a dinner, or I had a dream where I was eating food. I'm sure that's happened to you guys before, right? You ever had a dream where you're eating breakfast and then you wake up like, damn, I'm hungry now. Because like you wake up and you realize that wasn't real and now you're actually hungry. That will send me to eating breakfast immediately. Is if I have a dream about eating and then I wake up and now I'm like just hungry. But usually, like I said, unless I'd skipped dinner the prior night or I had a dream about eating, usually I'm not hungry before 9 a.m. I'll usually get hungry around around 10 a.m. And if I'm working from home, I can just make food. But if I'm like at work, um, I'll probably like leave the office and go to like 7-Eleven and come back and get something. And if I can, I'll just drink some coffee to um to hide my hunger until lunchtime. Um, Mona says, Carlton, I can eat like some very small, two hard boiled eggs, but again, it has to have been at least 4 hours first before I do fill up. Mostly on water and tea with lemon and honey. The thing about me is I'm always hungry. So the thing is, since I'm always hungry, I can just ignore this. I can just ignore the hunger signals because I can literally eat anytime. But the only time I don't want to eat is early in the morning because I just don't feel like it. It's early morning is the only time I typically will not eat. But anytime during the day, if there's food available, I'll eat it. Like if you offer me something, I will eat it. Pause. But um, I'm always hungry. So being always hungry, I can just turn off the hunger signals, and coffee helps. But I am always hungry. Like I remember my in my college days, my fraternity was like, "Yeah, if we ever need someone for like a eating contest, we're sending you." Because they were surprised how much I could eat. Because a lot of people are surprised how much I can eat because I'm slim fit, right? But I can eat a lot of food. Like I said a week ago, my family in Charlottesville, Virginia, the side of my family related to Thomas Jefferson. Um, they thought they were making fun of me, saying we don't think you're one of us because all of them are fat. And again, I'm slim fit, but that's because I work out all the time. And but they had a lot of food, for this. I think it was I think it was part of our family reunion, and so it was all this food. So I was just eating, and they just saw that I just kept eat. I just was, I wouldn't stop eating. I'm like, shit. If it's there, I'm gonna eat it. Again, pause. But they was like, yeah, you might be related to us after all. I was like, because they saw, yeah, I may be slim fit, but I can eat my fill. Like I can put look, I can put a morbidly obese person to shame when it comes to food. Because I burn the food like like an engine. Carlton says some of these YNs are psychopaths. They'll delete you and be at the club 3 hours later partying. Yeah. Um. I mean, I know we all talk about YNs. I talk about them myself, but they're not new. We were YNs 30 years ago, 20 years ago as well, right? Well, some of us. I wasn't, but but I mean, look. As much as we give hell to the young people today, we still have to put it in we still had to put it in historical context. The 90s was still way more violent than today. So as much trash as we talk about the YNs today, Generation X was wilding out back in the 90s and in the 80s. In the 80s and the 90s, Generation X was wilding out. We were horrible. I mean, so much so that like again, not that I agree with it, but that's when President Biden, former President Biden, Secretary Clinton, President Clinton, they were calling young black men super predators. That's when they came out with the crime bill of 1994 um, that initiated um, the harsh criminal penalties for violent crime. And as much as I hate that crime bill and how the institutionalizing of a lot of black men destroyed the black community, I'm going to say that a lot of those dudes needed to be locked up. A lot of those dudes needed to be locked up. Like we can look back at it through nostalgic glasses, but the the late 80s and early 90s was a really horrible time. And a lot of these YNs are the byproduct of that. They are the children and the grandchildren of these delinquents from the 90s. One says Scarecrow would be a sociopath, I think. Well, so there's different. So it depends. Some people trained in psychopathology don't make a distinction between sociopath and psychopath. They think they they treat sociopath as just the newer uh, term for psychopath. But I, like many others, make a distinction where the, the again, like the difference between Harlequin and the Joker. The Joker is a psychopath. Harlequin is a sociopath. What does that mean? A psychopath is tends to be someone is uh, psychopathic disorder tends to be innate, whereas sociopathic disorder tends to be learned. That's the difference. And there can be, some other minor distinctions, but generally, um, someone with sociopathic disorder is more something that's learned through, many through, social through both internal and external factors, whereas psychopathic disorder tends to be something ingrained um, at birth. So, uh, Strawberry says, I think it's wrong how society is offended by the word fat. Well, I'm gonna keep saying it. Like I won't call a person I don't know fat if I know them and we have and we have the understanding. Yes, I'll say someone's fat. They like if I know someone well and they're like, you know, how do I look? I'm like, man, you're still fat. But there what I think Strawberry is getting at is the fact that there is some virtue in cultural shame. There is the whole point of social shaming is that it tends to keep people in order, right? There are certain some social norms are healthy social norms. Not all social norms are healthy, by the way. I'm not saying that, but some social norms are there because they lead to a more healthy society. So a society that shuns fatness, it speaks for itself. I mean, people are healthier when they're not fat. Uh, a society that shames promiscuity. Again, when you have promiscuity, you know, you have more, you know, fatherless children. You have a rise in violence and crime. You have women that are unfit to be in relationships. So, I mean, there there is there is virtue in social shaming sometimes in calling out. Now, you shouldn't. Now, when I say there's virtue in shaming, shaming isn't the same as shaming isn't the same as harassment. Now, going around harassing fat people is inappropriate. That's not what I mean. What I'm saying is there should be there should be shame in fatness, whereas today they try to call it body positivity. There's nothing positive about being clinically obese. That is a medical condition, right? Just like there's you know talking about sex positivity, which is another way of talking about being promiscuous. That's not a good thing. It leads to higher incidence of STIs in society. It leads to more illegitimate children being born. It leads to broken homes. I mean, there is virtue in social shaming for some things, as is calling people fat when they are fat. Now and again, that doesn't mean you should harass fat people. You shouldn't go around seeing fat people and pointing out like, "Hey, fatty, fatty, McFatty, fatty." Like that's not appropriate and it's not helpful. What I'm saying is we should stigmatize being fat. Now anyone can become fat for out of certain variables, whether um, genetic um, or whatever. But becoming fat is not uh, it's not bad. It's staying fat that is the problem. And so yeah, there should be stigma about being fat because it's not healthy neither for the individual or for society. Now, which we see today, when you have a society where the majority of the general population is overweight, it's going to it causes problems. That means there's going to be more people being hospitalized. We saw during the pandemic, a lot of overweight people were more susceptible to COVID-19 because their bodies aren't healthy. And again, obesity itself is a medical condition. So, being that you're already obese, you have a pre existing health condition and you pair that with COVID-19, and that can get pretty nasty. And a lot of those people who died were unhealthy. They were people with pre existing health conditions, they were people who were obese, right? Those are the people who tended to die during the pandemic. Um, but let me keep going here. Mona says, well, when you have my 400-pound wife or husband, TV shows that's fat and shouldn't be promoted in that way. Similar with hoarders, it's always an underlying mental health condition with these people. Well, hoarding in itself is considered a mental health condition now. It's called clinical hoarding. Is a problem in itself, and yeah, often it is the case that people suffering from clinical obesity or clinical hoarding may have comorbid mental health conditions. Someone who's obese might also be suffering from body dysmorphia, clinical depression, general anxiety, things like that. Um, Omar says your dreams are powerful. I play guitar and I have heard so. Mm, mm. Mona says being thick or slightly chubby is not bad, and thick doesn't mean fat. Yeah, but I kind of cringe when people talk about thick in the black community because what they mean they are people people misuse the term like they refer to anyone who's just slightly slightly fat as thick and this is why a lot of black men will be willing to date fat women because they've been mentally conditioned by the black community to think fatness is being thick, and it's not. Thick is someone who has an hourglass figure. That's as opposed to a more rectilinear figure from someone who's really slim. That is thickness, but often in the black community, they refer to thickness as someone who's overweight, and this is why when I always hear people talking about they like thick women, I'm like, I already know they mean fat women because thick is just someone who has an hourglass figure. But often, like I said, in the black community, what they say by thick is just someone who's fat, not necessarily obese, but fat. Fat, the other reason why fat is not always a useful term is that it can refer to a bunch of different things. It can refer to someone who's chubby, that means someone who's slightly overweight, to someone who's significantly overweight, to someone who's obese. And there's three categories of obesity. There's class 1 obesity, there's class 2 severe obesity, and there's class 3 morbid obesity, like that people from that My 400 Pound Husband series. Strawberry says very sad to see. Um, Omar says songs in my dream woke me up and I played it. Oh, that's cool. Carlin says if you're slim, relatives always think you have a terminal illness. I'm not sick. Big mama, just exercising. You're right. Yeah, and that's another problem, Carlton, is because being overweight is so accepted in the black community, they think someone with a normal BMI is underweight. And I'm like, no, because I've been accused of that by family. I'm like, no, I'm exactly the right weight for my size. I was like, someone, someone around 5'9", 5'10" is not supposed to be like 200 pounds. That's just crazy. So the most I've ever weighed was 180 pounds. And that was it was like a year ago. Whereas when I left basic training, um, 27 years ago, I was 175 pounds, but that was pure. That was muscle density. So I knew. So when I saw 175 pounds, I wasn't even fretting that because up until I went to the army, I was like 140, 150 pounds, and I bulked up when I was in the army. It came back down after I left. I went back down to like 150, 160. I'm around. I circle now between 160, 170. Um, but yeah, I mean, the black community like fosters um, unhealthy habits. This is why men in the this is typically why men, Black American men, live shorter lives than the women because these women condition them to have unhealthy habits. Um, like I said, I've mentioned previously in the past, like I lived with family that have diabetes, and none of them are eating diets befitting someone who has type 2 diabetes. Like if you're eating Popeyes and steak subs and fried chicken or whatever every other day, you're eating bags of chips. This is not healthy. On top of that, you don't exercise. Like the black community is very bad when it comes to health, to fitness and nutrition. So when they see people who are physically fit, they often mistaken them for being skinny, especially black women. Black women, and I'm not trying to be insulting here, but most black women are overweight. I mean, Kevin Samuels pointed this out 3 years ago. It's like about 80% of black women are overweight, and the majority of those who are overweight are also obese. So, and you hear it because you'll see. when a lot of these women see women of other races who are the proper size for their height, they will call them, "Oh, that's that little skinny bitch." No, she's not skinny. You're just fat, and they can't tell the difference. They think being fat is normal. And like I said, because the general population is so overwhelmingly fat today, it's like being overweight has been normalized, and it's not normal. This just because a majority of people are overweight doesn't make it normal. It just means a majority of people are unhealthy. In a day and age where we have 24-hour gyms that cost only like $10-15 a month, there's really no excuse not to be fit. You don't even need to go to a gym. You could just throw on some sneakers and go out for a jog. Melissa says, "Yeah, I agree. 80s and 90s were far more wild. They really were." Carlton says, "Calories in, calories out." Yeah. He said, "Thick is also those CrossFit chicks." Yeah, like I said, thickness, people misuse the term thick. Like I said, thick is not supposed to refer to someone who's chubby or overweight. It was supposed to refer to someone who's curvy as opposed to someone who has a more model-esque slim body, right? Um, I mean, look at I don't like the chick, but who's that? The WNBA player, the the black chick. Damn it, can't remember her name. Looking up her name, I can't remember her name. She's a fellow Terp, she's a lady Terp. Um, but she is what a lot of people probably consider her thick. She's curvy. She's not skinny. She has a booty. Um, damn, what's her name? It's right here. Reese. What's her name? Reese. Whatever. Yeah, Angel Reese. Yeah, that's it. Carlton. Thanks. She's People probably consider her thick, but again, a lot of black men have been conditioned to consider consider being thick fat, and I'm like, those are not the same. Like a lot of women who hit the gym are thick, like like you know they they're curvy in the right way. They have that hourglass figure. That's thick. But if you're overweight, that's not thick. That's just being overweight. And a lot of people confuse thickness with fatness, particularly in the black community. We've been conditioned to think that the chubby girls were the thick ones. No, it's not. No, it's not. It was the girls. For me, thick were the girls who had a slim waist and a big butt. So, but I mean, and that's not to say that you can't have your preferences. If someone does like um, overweight women, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine to like overweight women. But what we should stop doing is giving it the euphemism of thick because that's not thick. Strawberry says, I think having a pet can help people with loneliness. Yes. I mean, that's why Kevin Samuel says you can buy a dog and die alone. But um, I people need social interaction. Like no one. This is why I disagree with people calling themselves introverts, which is just BS. But aside from that, no, people need social interactions. Yes, pets can alleviate the loneliness, but a pet cannot return the same social interaction as being amongst other functional humans can. What we don't want to see people do is become shut-ins, you know, develop agoraphobia, and the only person they relate to is their cat or dog, you know, and when they're suffering from illness, the dog can't drive you to the hospital. Um, if you don't feel like cooking, the cat can't make you an omelet. Um, if you're feeling horny, well, I guess you can do that with an animal, but you shouldn't because that's bestiality. But you get the point. Yes, animals can be helpful for folks suffering from mental health issues. This is why you often have, support, these so-called emotional support animals. I don't agree with the emotional support animals because people have abused that. So much so that the APA was told 10 years ago not to, was told not, the, the APA had advised APA board certified therapists not to sign off on emotional support animals because people were abusing that. So, um, but yes, animals can definitely be useful in helping out with loneliness, but we still need social interactions with other humans. Um, like for instance, there were some programs in prison where they let the inmates take care of. Excuse me. Let me get some water. So there have been correctional facilities where they let the inmates um, pet animals. They were bringing animals for them to pet. Um, and I think in one there was even a program where they actually had them adopt an animal. I think I would have to fact check that. If someone else in the chat room can fact check me on that. But I think there was like a few correctional facilities that actually let the inmates adopt an animal, and it actually helped in seeing these inmates having um, better behavior within these institutions. Because yes, being locked up is can foment loneliness. This is why people being put in solitary confinement is considered cruel and unusual punishment, because people aren't supposed to be sequestered away from other humans for a long amount of time, unless they are unless they are a danger to those other people, or those people are a danger to them. But even still, when you are sequestered away from other people for a sustained amount of time, it actually does cause mental health problems in itself. And you're already talking about you're in an environment where a lot of people are already quite distressed because they've had their freedom taken away from them. Maybe they deserve to have their freedom taken away from them. I'm not discounting that, but um, having people in solitary confinement is, I would argue, cruel and unusual punishment. Again, unless they pose an immediate danger to other people. But that sound like Robin Scherbatsky saying, but if you never saw How I Met Your Mother, you won't get that. But anyway, yes, animals can definitely help with people suffering from mild mental health issues like anxiety, depression. But people still need to be able to interact with other humans because a healthy that is a healthy thing to do. Barney Stinson rules. No, 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 no. That that wasn't a Barney Stinson rule. That part, his bro code. He had a whole his whole book of bro code. I miss watching How I Met Your Mother when they first aired it on FX. When they first put it on FX, like all the syndicated episodes, it was really good because every episode used to end with a different bro code at the end of the show. And they didn't do that for the regular broadcast. For the regular broadcast, they didn't do his bro code thing. They only did that on FX, which was kind of cool. And that's what kind of brought me into watching the show. Because I didn't watch it when it originally aired until the last. I didn't start watching it on TV um, in real time until the last season. Um, no, the second to last season, I started watching it um, on TV. But before then, I was watching it on cable and FX when it was in syndicated, and they will put a different bro code on it. But that wasn't part of his bro code. He said the bro code is a great audio book. Is it based off the TV show? I remember MTV also had the bro code. But it was like a TV show. It wasn't on MTV. It was on MTV2, like 11 years ago when MTV2 was still popping. Like MTV2 had became the new MTV back like 12 years ago. So I remember when they had Bro Code on MTV2, and they had all these comedians come in and talk about different stuff. And then they made a spinoff. They did Girl Code, and then they did one where they combined both of them. That ended around 2014, 2015. But I've been rewatching How I Met Your Mother on Netflix. The narration doesn't bother me. You were saying hard to rewatch because Bob Saget's narration that doesn't bother me. I mean, I know he passed away, but that's gonna happen. So um, there are other actors on that show that are no longer here. I mean, not the main cast, but minor actors. Actually, I think the guy who played um, Wayne Brady's father. I think he passed away. I think he passed away. I think the guy who played Barney Stinson's father. I think he passed away. I'm not sure. So I pirated all of the seasons on torrent, and then watched it until very late, like 8 years ago when I binged it. Mm-hmm. Wait, getting back to the subject. So Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So where where were we before we got lost up in talking about thick chicks? I was basically saying, there's value in social shaming because often we tend to social shame behaviors which are um, we tend to shame behaviors in society de- that are degenerate, that lead to poor consequences. Like I said, um, we should not be celebrating being fat as body positivity when it is a medical condition. We should not celebrate promiscuity as sexual positivity when promiscuity leads to broken families, high incidences of venereal diseases, and the old term for STIs, venereal disease. It leads to a high incidence of venereal diseases. It leads to a lot of unintended pregnancies of where you're going to have a bunch of people, unhappy people, because they were brought into the world with parents that are they are incapable or unfit to take care of them. So, and we know through behavioral research that um, the healthiest outcomes for a child is when they have two parents and the uh, parents are homeowners, and this typically won't happen when these are unintended pregnancies by people just wilding out. Um, and um, on top of that, when they are born into fatherless communities, like it may not necessarily be bad that you don't have a father, but it's bad if you live in a community where there are no fathers, like most ghettos are. In most ghettos, you only know one or two guys who typically have a father, and usually that's a stepfather. Not even a biological father; it's usually a stepfather. Um, in the 80s and 90s, most of us who had dads were probably living with stepdads. And the reason being is that a lot of those women, um, these guys saw worth investing in these women at the time. But a lot of us grew up and saw that the stepfather didn't get much out of the deal. So most of us like, man, I don't want to be a stepdaddy. You're not gonna get anything out of it. Like anyway, I'm about to go. I'm losing my voice and it's almost 2 a.m. So if people have other questions revolving around either men's issues or mental health awareness month, men's mental health awareness month, or how it connects to Pride Month, you can leave it in the comment section, or you can cash at me with the question, and I'll get back to you. But either way, that's gonna wrap it up for me. It's almost 2 hours in, and like I said, it's almost 2 a.m. So I want to get to bed. It's already way past my bedtime. Losing my voice, as you can see, and I'm trying to drink water to stave off losing my voice, but it's not helping. So, anywho, you already seeing the little retards coming into the live stream. So that's my cue to go. Again, a lot of these people up late at night who have unhinged, who act unhinged in these streams is because they need to get their asses to bed instead of being up all night sleeping during the day. So they have no productive lives because you, and you, before people say, well, you're up this late. Mind you, I get paid for this. That's the difference. I'm getting paid to do this. But a lot of people up all night long is unhealthy. And again, when you combine all these factors, this leads to a prevalence of mental health problems. They're up all night, they don't eat well, they don't drink enough water, and they don't exercise. And then some of them are beyond the norm. Some of them are beyond the normal range of psychopathology. Some of them need professional help, and instead of getting professional help, they lurk around in these live streams looking to seek attention from the content creators. Oh, both are moonlit. Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's late at night, so I assume that a lot of people would be trolls. But for what I'm talking about today, it actually kind of you know added up, right? I assume this is why I kind of did this late because I knew it would be geared to those very sorts of people. These trolls, again, most of these trolls are unhinged people because they don't sleep, They don't eat well. They probably don't drink water. They probably drink soda all day. Um, and they don't exercise, and that's why they're fucked up in the head. And like I said, for traditional men or men generally, um, they would be more mentally fit by being physically fit. Like for men, men and women don't address their issues the same. It's not as beneficial for men to sit down for an hour and talk to a counselor as it is for women, because that's how they're socialized to address their problems. We're not. For us, I think a gym membership is much better than talking to a counselor. Melissa says, "Yeah, I bet they they put the soda right down when you said that." Of course, like they're probably drinking Monster energy drinks, Red Bull, Mountain Dew, and all that other fucking poison, and wondering why they're up all night playing video games like a bunch of losers. Most of them are fat or out of shape with their little chin beards, typing on the, typing little trolley comments on this live stream, and then they jump between live streams as they get banned from each stream. They just go to one or another seeking attention. It's like, none of us are their father. You're not going to get attention from us because your father didn't want your bitch ass. He said he'd go out for some cigarettes and never saw your bitch ass again because he couldn't stand your stinky pussy mother. And he couldn't stand your retarded peanut shaped head ass. Sorry, someone had to say it. But I'm gonna go Carlton and Moonlit, guys. Thank y'all for rocking with me again. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm trying to get. By the way, I'm trying to get Micah back, but she actually needs a load on her phone so that she can get back on. Because like I told you, most people in the Philippines use use the preloaded cell phones. Yeah, I don't want another man calling me handsome. Again, TMI. Like, you're definitely Gen Z, because no. Go to bed, get up, get some exercise, eat a hearty meal, drink water, go to work. Like, that's where I'll end it. But thank you, everyone, that rock with me. Of course, my moderator, Moonlit. Shout out to him. To my to my regular Carlton. Uh, thank you as always, guys. I'm out. Peace, guys.